Welcome to Doing the Dang Thing podcast. I am your host, Jill Schmieding. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am super excited for the topic that I have to discuss. I think it's super relatable, and a lot of people are going to be listening being like, yes, why the hell do I do that? Because I know that's what I was saying to myself when it was happening just this last weekend. Before I jump into my story, I want to just describe what this podcast is all about for those new listeners out there. I'm getting more and more of you every single day, and I'm super excited. So thank you very much for tuning in. This podcast, which is called Doing the Dang Thing, is all about helping everyday women play big and aspire for more. And I've given it a lot of thought because when I talk to people, some people are like, what is an everyday woman? And I'm like, great question. So I came up with a little bit of an explanation so I can tell people what an everyday woman is. Well, here goes. An everyday woman is a working age woman who is interested in self-improvement and desires to connect and build community with others through shared lived experiences. That's a mouthful, so I'm going to repeat it one more time. An everyday woman is a working age woman who is interested in self-improvement and desires to connect and build community with others through shared lived experiences. And I really like the idea of the shared lived experiences because, boy, I tell you what, I am playing big and aspiring for more in my life constantly, if I'm being honest with you, always stretching myself and getting myself out of my comfort zone. And it takes an army of amazing women to be able to do that. And I have, stories for you for days in which I have amazing supporting women helping me grow and aspire for more. But tonight, I always say tonight because I'm recording my podcast at nighttime. So you might be listening to this early in the morning. I'm recording late at night. Not too late. I actually go to bed at like 9 p.m. So early evening, we should say. Early evening. Anyways, I digress. Let's jump right in to this week's topic, which is all about speaking up in uncomfortable situations. Oh my God, let me just take a breath. I'm probably going to have some anxiety come up as I talk about this. You know, it's interesting. Speaking up in uncomfortable situations, for me personally, is really hard. And I'm getting better at it. But I had something happen just this last weekend that I want to share with you because I think it's really relatable. And I don't think I'm alone at all, actually, in what happened. So I want to start by just saying that over the last probably 6 months, maybe, it's probably been longer than that. Maybe it'll be 9 months. Boy, time flies. Who cares? It's been months that I have been putting myself through, and don't laugh, cat exposure therapy. Yes, I think I made that up, by the way. Cat exposure therapy. Because I've been afraid of cats for most of my life. But I have amazing friends, amazing lady friends that I love to hang out with, and they all have cats. And so I hate being jumpy and skittish and afraid to sit down on their couch. And I get really nervous when the cat gets the zoomies. And, it's just not a good feeling. And so I was just like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put myself through some cat exposure therapy, and I'm going to sit down with some friends who have cats, and I'm going to spend some time, just sitting next to those little purry little kittens. You know what I'm saying? Some of them are not very little. And then also what I did, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, but also what I did is I watched, not only am I doing cat exposure therapy with some girlfriends, but I also watched, I highly recommend this Netflix show called Inside the Mind of a Cat. Inside the Mind of a Cat. Boy, I have to tell you, it really opened my eyes up to this idea that, like, as much as cats scare me, and it's mostly the zoomies, I think is what they're called, that is what scares me when cats like run around all over the place really, really fast. They get the zoomies to work out energy, I think, or something. And the show explained that. And then the show also just explained different ways to kind of communicate with cats and what different things, why they do different things. And it was just really insightful. And I highly recommend it to anyone who's just interested in cats, or maybe you're like me and cats give you a little bit of anxiety or nervousness. I say go for it, watch the show. And if you're willing, do some cat exposure therapy. It's so interesting. There is a place here in Denver, Colorado that my friend invited me to. I'm not ready to go there yet, but it's called the Cat Cafe. It's in Highlands area. And yeah, is it the Denver Cat Company? I think it's called the Denver Cat Company, where you can like have pastries and coffee. And I think there's a whole bunch of cats running around. So that makes me nervous just thinking about it, to be honest with you. I can handle one cat at a time. I'm pretty sure this is the place. The pictures are, yeah, I'm looking online right now. The pictures make me feel like it's the place. There's cats everywhere. So if this is your jam, I say go for it. I'm not ready to go to the Denver Cat Company, but maybe one day. That gives me a little heebie jeebies. Let's just breathe deep for a moment. Okay. Whew. So anyways, I have done cat exposure therapy, which, by the way, shout out to Mariana, my girl who has been on this show before, who I love dearly. She let me go over to her house and visit with her cat V, and then shout out to my girl Amelia, who has 2 adorable cats, and Rue is an amazing little cat. I think it's a kitten still, but nevertheless, Rue just lets me pet him on his belly, and it's very, very therapeutic when the cats just lay there and let you pet their belly or pet their whole body or whatever, their head. I even got licked, which was a thrill. But this last weekend, okay, that was a long definition of what I've been doing, I know, but hopefully you found that entertaining and you got some good, places to go, TV shows to watch, and different types of things that you can do if you want to get more comfortable with the cats. This last weekend, though, I got up close and personal with my friend's cat. So my friend, Heather, who you hear from, and you will be hearing from hopefully in the next week or so on this podcast, she has an adorable cat as well. And we have this amazing night called a burn night. And I will let Heather explain that to you. But mainly it's you process certain things that you want to let go. You write them on a piece of paper and then you burn them in a fire. And there's a lot more to it, but that's the idea. And we all came over to her house and we were getting ready to proceed with the burning night ceremony, and her cat was roaming around her house. And when I'm standing up or sitting on a couch, I can pretty much handle cats at this point. It used to be that I would be really nervous when they would pounce on the back of the chair and walk across the back of the couch or something. My hair on the back of my neck would just stand up. Nowadays, I'm like, it's okay. Like, they're not out to get me. And so I would sit still. But this particular night, Heather was just like, hey, how about everybody bring yoga mats and we'll lay down on the ground and we'll listen to some like music and process kind of what we want to let go of and just kind of meditate for a while. And so me being a rule follower, I get my yoga mat out and I take it over to Heather's house and we're getting done eating and everyone's getting their yoga mats out and those that brought them, and I lay mine on the floor and I see her cat roaming around. And guess what? I just laid down on the couch or on the floor. I laid down on the floor and I was just like, hey, and I spoke up a little bit, but in this moment, I was really uncomfortable. And she is a dear, dear friend. But I was too afraid to speak up and be like, hey, can you just put your cat outside so that I can really zone out and get in my Zen mode for 7 minutes. We're going to listen to this song. It was a 7-minute long song. And I couldn't do it. Like, I could not do it. Oh, it makes me so sad even right now thinking about it because I laid down, I put my body in an uncomfortable situation because I was too afraid to speak up. How many of you have been in that boat? It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Whether you're laying on a floor around something like an animal that you're not comfortable with, or you're out with friends and you're feeling a bit uncomfortable, but you stay anyways. I've been there too. Yeah. It's not a good feeling, and I have been processing it ever since the burn night, why it happened. And I asked Heather, before I even posted this podcast or even recorded, excuse me, I asked Heather, I went to her as the host and said, "Hey, this is how I've been feeling. This is what happened on Friday night. Is this okay if I bring it up, to everybody on the podcast, everyone that listens?" She was like, "Absolutely. It's totally fine if you bring it up. I don't have any problems with that." So here I am sharing my story. And there was a couple other things that night that actually happened that have made me kind of process what is wrong with me is kind of what is wrong with me that I'm not willing to speak up to friends that I know love me and that want the best for me and that wouldn't feel, any sort of anger if I just said, "Hey, could you put your cat outside?" Right? But there was more to the evening, more moments in which I sat in uncomfortable situations, right? Things that just didn't feel good for my body, didn't feel good for me, and I sat through it. And it made me angry at the time, but now that I've just kind of processed it, kind of working through that. So there was a moment too where we because of the burning ceremony, you need a fire, right? And so we had a fire pit and it was outside and it's February. And so it's cold. It's cold. Okay. I am a girl who, if you know me at all, it could be 72 degrees outside, beautiful sunny day, and I have a sweater on. Like not a heavy sweater, okay? Don't judge. Not a heavy sweater, but just a sweater nevertheless. I have a coat on usually. It's cold. And so sitting outside with my piece of paper, ready to read it out loud and burn it in the fire, which the fire pit was lovely, by the way. Shout out to Crystal, kept that fire going. The fire was lovely, but it wasn't warm enough for me. And I didn't come dressed appropriately to sit outside in 35-degree weather with just a fire pit going. So we had the ceremony and we burned the paper. And then I was ready to go. I was ready to go back inside. I was ready to call it a night. And I didn't speak up. And then my feet went numb. I'm not joking because I didn't wear my smart wool socks, and that was not the night for Birks and socks. I'll tell you that right now. It was the night for boots and smart wool socks, and I didn't have either of those on. And so my feet went numb. I was freezing, and I wasn't engaged in the conversation, although the conversation was very good. And so I've just kind of been processing, like, why did I do that? Why did I stay? Why? Well, one reason why I stayed was because the conversation was so tantalizing. It was hard to get, like, you don't want to interrupt. You don't want to interrupt. I didn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable too by being the first one to be like, "Okay, I'm ready to hang out, leave. Ready to call it a night." Yeah, I stayed probably 45 minutes to an hour, maybe longer. It felt like 45 minutes to an hour. I don't know if it really was, but I stayed a lot longer than I really wanted to in a situation in which I wasn't comfortable because I was too afraid to speak up. And so finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I in when the conversation did have a lull, I was just like, "Okay, I'm gonna head out. I'm calling it a night." And there was a few other women that also said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go with you too." And I was just like, I am freezing," and they were like, "Oh yeah, me too." And I was thinking to myself, were we all sitting out here? Not all of us, because I think some definitely enjoyed it. But I was like, were there majority of us women sitting out here uncomfortable, freezing, maybe wanting to go back inside and keep the night going, but at like a warm 75 degrees. Um, but we didn't, and we just stayed uncomfortable. Why? Why do we do that? Why do you do that? Is my question. Do you find that you do that? And have you ever given it any thought on why you might do this to yourself? Have you ever tried to speak up when you're uncomfortable? You know, it's interesting. I've been doing somatic therapy, and it's all about how you feel in your body. And so I've been taking note of like when I feel uncomfortable, when do I feel anxiety? When do I feel that frog in my throat or that aching in my chest that I know is anxiety? And just kind of feeling it through it, not pushing it under the rug or trying to ignore it, but really feel it. And I did feel it that night, but unfortunately, I did, push it under the rug, I guess. I ignored it. I was too afraid to be embarrassed. I was too afraid to be the one to speak up about the cat. I didn't want to be high maintenance. I didn't want to be a nuisance. Everyone else loved the cat, and I didn't want to make others feel uncomfortable by being like, can you put your cat away? Like they were all, there was people petting the cat and getting some wonderful endorphins, I'm sure, from that. And who am I to say your cat should be in another place? You know, this whole thing got me thinking about a childhood experience that I had actually that really, really is like similar to this, and it caused a lot of trauma. And it's crazy how our bodies hold on to that. And I mean, obviously, there's tons of books out there for that and whatnot. But it's like I have my Aunt Linda. I'm going to tell you the story. My Aunt Linda, who's passed away and has been for many, many years, my dad's only sister. She had a dog, and she had like an ankle biter dog. But when you're like 6 years old, that ankle biter is not an ankle biter. That's like a face biter. Okay. So me and my sisters, I don't know how, why, or when it happened, but like, I don't know. We all had a season of being afraid of dogs. At least that's what my memory, like how my memory serves me. And I was the youngest of four girls, and I was really, really afraid of dogs most of my childhood. And I remember going over to my Aunt Linda's house for a birthday party with my family and my parents. And I also remember her never wanting to put her dog away, even though she knew I was like deathly afraid of that damn dog. And she made that dog more important than me. She made me feel unseen, unloved, unappreciated, unwanted. Like she made me feel so, so little. And as a child, right, you just survive those moments. You just do what you have to get through it. And in that moment, I like crawl. I mean, we had one blowout one night. I remember like it was yesterday. I remember my dad got mad and he was like, "We're going home. We're going home." And and we lived down the street, so it wasn't a big deal. But it was just like everybody piled into the van, and the dog came running down the cul-de-sac, and I fucking crawled up my dad's body and like sat on his shoulders, and I was freaking out. And yeah, that was so, I remember like it was yesterday. Oh, do you have those memories? I'm sure you do. Whew. And yeah, it just, in that moment, that traumatic experience for me has stayed with me, obviously, my whole life. And even to the point where last weekend, I felt like I had to make a pet more important than me. I had to make an owner of a pet more comfortable than me, right? And it doesn't mean that I can't compromise. So if an owner's like, "Oh my god, my dog is the best thing in the world," like there's obviously some compromise that can be done there. But I think there is something to be said for at least speaking up. And I spoke to Heather about this, and I was just like, man, I wish I could have been like, can you just put your cat outside? Because he was an outdoor cat too. You could just put that cat outside for 7 minutes so that I can be in Zen mode and then like really channel the things that I want to let go of during our burn ceremony. She would have gladly done that. I was too afraid to speak up. And it's interesting to me because I did want to share this whole thing. I wanted to share this whole story with you because I think it's really relative, right? Is it relatable, relative, whatever the word is? I think other people can definitely relate to everything that I just talked about, whether it be cats, dogs, spiders, worms. I have other phobias we're not going to talk about right now, but and you know, I want to know why. I want to know why I have trouble speaking up and making people feel uncomfortable in order for me to feel a little bit more comfortable. And that is what we're actually going to talk about next week on the podcast. So I am going to bring Heather back. And the reason why I love Heather is because Heather has done so much work on herself, and she's such a wise woman. And I do think that she's an everyday woman, by the way. She's an everyday woman, like I talked about at the beginning of the show, who is invested in self-improvement through and through. And I value a lot of what she has to say. And she is going to come back next week and talk a little bit about why I may be putting others first and not listening to my body and not speaking up when I'm uncomfortable. And here is a little sneak peek of the discussion that Heather and I are going to be having next week.
I don't think it's just women. I think for me, it really was religion and school, honestly, just the way we indoctrinate children to outsource your perception of what's okay to people who aren't you. So it's like the pastor knows, the teachers know, the prophet knows, the parents know, the person who's not you knows better. And then very unfortunately for you specifically, you were so young and I'm just trigger warning, going to mention the assault thing. Because you went through that, again, this is super common with people who had their agency infringed upon in such a profound and formative way. Somebody basically told you when your whole psyche and body were still forming, I make the decisions about this, not you. And in order to stay safe in that moment, you had to say, I'm just going to stay alive. I need to just stay in stasis. And so it's very adaptive for you to not check in with what you want, because if you had to check in with that in that moment, you would have freaked out, and maybe you wouldn't have survived. Maybe they would have freaked out. So you probably went into some kind of freeze or dissociative response. Rather than suffer harm, which you need to have love and compassion for that part of yourself, because she was so brave and so kind in helping you survive in that moment. And if that happened multiple times, or if there are other people in your life who are constantly telling you, no, Jill, you don't get to decide, I want this, too bad for you, why wouldn't that teach your psyche that what you want is never going to get met? That you can't ask for that, because if you do it, it's going to be dangerous.
As I said, the things Heather has to say, due to all of the hard work that she has put in to investing in self-improvement, is amazing. I do hope that you tune in next week to hear the full interview, where Heather and I are just going to dig deep on why women and people in general stay uncomfortable. That's all I have for you this week on Doing the Dang Thing. I do hope that you continue to play big and aspire for more in every moment of your life. Take care, everyone. Okay, I do want to, at the very end, if you're still listening, this is like the bloopers, but not a blooper. This is a win. I have to consider this a win. and I want to share with you. And I didn't want to mess with all the editing to throw it in the middle. I would consider the fact that I was able to lay down on the ground at Heather's house. This goes all the way back to the cat story. Lay down on the floor where I was again like my 6-year-old self. I was eye to eye with that cat. Like I was eye to eye with that dog when I was 6 years old. But this time, this time I was able to lay on that ground knowing that cat was going to come into that room. And I did. This is where I kind of cut you off or cut myself off earlier. But I did say to Heather, hey, is your cat going to like stay in the other room? And she goes, yeah, don't worry. The cat's going to stay in the other room. And I'm sure she thought that as well. But the cat was like, no, there are lovely ladies in this living room. I'm going to go check these ladies out. And that's exactly what her cat did. So he quietly walked around each individual lady laying on the ground. Now, while every single one of the ladies had their eyes shut and they were in like Zen mode, I had eyes on the cat. Eyes on the cat. The cat slowly sniffed the hair of the girl laying next to me and then proceeded to walk behind my head. Did he smell the hair of did he smell my hair, my forehead? I have no idea. I stayed still and just tried to remember the cat was not out to get me. The cat is not out to get me. He then proceeded to pounce on the back of the couch, and one of my friends started to pet him, and then he jumped back down, and then he walked out of the room. I want to say that is, I do consider that a win. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but you were uncomfortable the whole time. And isn't the show all about like speaking up when you're uncomfortable? Absolutely it is. But come on, we got to celebrate the wins. You know what I'm saying? I'm all about celebrating the small wins because those small wins will one day equal a very big win. So I just had to give you an update and let you know that I was able to lay down and somewhat enjoy the meditation and the song and not freak out when the cat came around and walked right above my head while I was laying on the ground. That's all. That's the update. That's like the blooper section of my podcast. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I love sharing with you guys, by the way, all of my personal stories. Some of them I'm still not brave enough to share with you, and so maybe one day I will be. But I really appreciate all of you tuning in. It means so much to me. And shout out to all of the males out there who have come up to me and said, dang, your podcast is good. I really like it. I know that my target audience is women, but I really, really love hearing that men find my podcast valuable. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for all of the support. Take care, everyone.